Hey everybody, it's Chris. This is another Lazy Trucker Disc Golf review brought to you by the Hazy Shade in Dayton, Ohio. Thank you yet again to them for all their support this year and making these reviews possible. Today we're going to be looking at the Westside Discs Bard. The Bard has flight numbers of 5403, and it actually came out while I was sponsored by Dynamic Discs, but for some reason I just kind of glossed over this release. I don't know if it was because it's a taller profile mid. You'll see me compare it to a Verdict in this review, and the Verdicts are just a little bit flatter, and I prefer that Truth Buzz type feel as opposed to the taller mids. But for whatever reason I didn't think much of the Bard, but I decided this year that I wanted to go back and review some of those discs. The Warship was one, the Bard is one, the Tursus is coming hopefully in the near future. But I wanted to take a look at the Bard, just give it another chance. And man, am I glad I did. The numbers 5403 give intuitively a disc that should be reliably overstable, not super overstable like a Justice or a Deflector or a Walker, but something that's reliably overstable, and that's what I got from this disc. Something that I could throw flat and rely to get back around the corner. Even if it's a little bit windy, that fade should kick in. Not going to be just meat hook, get to the ground and skip, but nice glidey flight before fading. And that's what I got out of this. In fact, it compared very favorably to the Verdict. I was throwing this one actually more intuitively. I could just throw it, and I almost could predict where it was going to land better than the Verdict, which I might overthrow the target with. You're going to see the Matrix show up because I was reviewing the Matrix, and it's a little bit more overstable too. But I actually went to my old Ace box and pulled out an old ESP FLX drone. Now this isn't a great comparison because you can see that this drone was used and worked. So it is straighter than it was when it was new. But I knew that going in, and I made that adjustment. I knew the drone was going to go a little bit straighter, but I wanted to see that end fade. And what I got to see out of that was a very predictable fade at the end of flights for both of them. It reminded me why I liked the drone so much, and made me really comfortable with the Bard when I was reviewing it. So if you are looking for a taller disc, or just a reliable, overstable mid-range, the Bard could be a really good option. Again, this is not going to be as overstable as a Justice or a Deflector style disc. It's not going to be just super meat hook. This is when you're going to be able to throw a little bit harder, get a straighter flight out of. Now this is me as a 400-foot thrower. If you're a 500-foot thrower, you're going to throw it a lot flatter. It's going to stay flatter longer, and it should still fade. It might even turn out a little bit for you, but it should be pretty straight line. In fact, I think guys like Dave Feldberg carries old Bards as like one of his straight mids if he's playing over water. I think Matty O throws one for a similar type of thing. They're just going to get a straighter flight because they throw farther. If you're a lower arm speed, say 300-foot thrower, this is going to be an even more overstable disc for you, and that might actually be a good overstable slot for you as opposed to something like a Justice that's going to just be too overstable. So, Westside Discs Bard, flight number's 5403. I actually had a ton of fun reviewing this. I've recommended it to a few people since then just because of the results I got. So, let's take it to the field, let's take it to the course so you can see it in flight. As always, if you have questions, please put them below so I can get back to you. And as always, thanks for watching. Here we have wing comparisons, and you're going to see with this first disc, the Matrix, as well as the next disc, the Verdict, that both of those discs are a little blunter nosed, but also flatter than the Bard. So there's a very different hand feel on these three discs. The Bard is going to be taller. I actually like to fan grip it, whereas I tend to power grip the lower profile mids. And then the drone has a very similar feel. It is flat top because it's old ESP FLX, but does feel more similar in the hand. As we head out to the field, we'll start at 60% power. This is mimicking maybe a 300-foot thrower, and this went out to 200, 210-foot range approximately. I can't remember exactly, I forgot to measure these, I apologize. Powering up to 80% on the outside throw. This is usually how I'm going to use a Bard, just throwing it out wide and let it fall back to center, and you can see the results there. And then powering it up with a little bit of flex, you can see that overstability is still going to pull it back left of center, and this went out to about 300, which is about where I was putting the Bard when I was going for more distance with it. First comparison disc is the Matrix. You can see both of them go outside the screen. They were thrown on hyzers. The Matrix was thrown wider, which you couldn't see, and is why it is going to finish a little bit more right. But both discs you can see are fairly overstable. I am going to say the Bard is a touch more overstable, and you can see that here. The Matrix was thrown fairly flat, stays flat, and fades, whereas the Bard was actually flexed, and yet is going to finish just as left as the Matrix as it corrected and then faded out. Here they're both going to get flexed around this tree. Now the Matrix wasn't thrown as high, but you're going to see the Bard corrects itself, fades past the pin right across the face, whereas the Matrix is to the right. Part of that was due to height again. The second disc for comparison is the Glimmer X Verdict. You can see here the Bard was thrown higher. Both were thrown on hyzer approaches. The Bard, again, with that extra height, is going to go a little bit more left, but both are very overstable. Again, I do find the Bard to be more overstable than the Verdict overall, and you're going to see that on this next two shots for sure. You can see the Bard was thrown flat. With that height, it's going to stall and fade left, whereas the Verdict was thrown with a hyzer release, and that's how it got farther over to the left. Again, here's an example of that. You can see the Bard is released fairly flat, and it stays a little bit closer to center of the screen, whereas the Verdict is thrown on that hyzer the entire way. That's going to cause that steeper angle from the Verdict because of the angle that it was thrown on, but the Bard's natural stability brings it down. Now this is the disc I was actually pretty excited to compare to, the drone. Now this is an 08 Worlds drone that I used for multiple seasons, so it was seasoned for sure, a little beaten in. But you can see I was getting pretty similar results on it by adapting the drone's angle of release just a touch. This was the most exciting comparison to me because I used to love the drone almost 15 years ago now. I guess I was throwing it in 2010, so 13 years ago. But you can see the Bard and the drone have fairly similar flight patterns. Here, just a little bit of a flex. Both are going to fade back. I found the drone, and I think this is because it is seasoned to be a little bit longer than the Bard in flight. But again, I think that was because it was broken in. Otherwise, the flights were... I could tip both of them similarly. I could throw them on hyzer similarly, and they were getting pretty decent results next to each other. To recap, the Westside Discs Bard is a reliably overstable mid-range. It's not going to be Justice or Deflector overstable, but instead it's a disc that you can throw flat, get some distance out of, and still rely on to fade left at the end. If you want to try out a Bard, head over to hazyshade.com and use the code TEAMHAZYCHRIS for 5% off your order. If you found this review helpful or informative, please feel free to like it, share it, or even subscribe to the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.